All right, so go ahead.
I mean, I guess this is a somewhat formal protocol. Everybody is very well aware of our speaker today, Peter Csaszar from the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. And Peter, working with Dr. Hassan, who is not able to be with us today, worked together to put together a grant to integrate entrepreneurship into a technical course. And so our workshop today then is going to more or less see how Peter taught microprocessors and entrepreneurial mindset, and see if we can glean a little bit of understanding from all of his efforts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Don, for the introductions. Thanks for you all for coming. I see you are filming the show, so I try to keep my stage fever at a minimum, but please still do not post it at youtube.com. So Don gave the introduction as to what this project was all about. And really, here is the summary slide rehashing of what you just heard. Basically, this work was developed in the framework of the current curriculum development grant submitted in 2006. This grant is funded by the Kern Foundation. That is, as I understand, a foundation geared specifically toward entrepreneurship. And part of the work was also funded by the Lear Foundation. My co-developer, Dr. Hassan, can't be with us today, but I'll point out the collaboration between the two of us. So the first question may arise, why to add non-technical content to a technical course in the first place, and why of all other contents, entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial content was picked? Now the answer to this is, one of the explanations is the ongoing trends at Lawrence Tech to include entrepreneurship into the skill set provided to students. And this is highlighted by the recently completed educational goals. More specifically, goal group number 3 states that undergraduates will receive an education that enables them to exhibit entrepreneurial skills and to assume positions of leadership. And probably you guys have also heard this more recent radio ads. It's not just future in the making anymore, it's leaders in the making. So basically, in line with this effort, the choice was made to provide entrepreneurial content in certain select courses across the engineering curriculum, including, I believe, civil is also part of it, and more departments will join. So the next question that may arise is, why the microprocessors course within the electrical and computer engineering curriculum of all courses? Well, not written on this slide, one of the considerations was the age of students or the level of education the students have received. A junior level course seemed to be ideal for the purpose, because freshman and sophomore level courses, first of all, students are younger, may not be mature enough, and also those courses in freshman and sophomore level fundamental courses really need to focus more on technical contents so that students can get the foundation of the principles. But so microprocessors course is a junior level course. But on top of this, there are many junior level courses. Why microprocessors still? Well, the answer is not difficult to find if we come to think of the amazing success stories in entrepreneurship we have seen in the recent decades. And we understand that these success stories were all grouped around digital technology, microprocessors, computers, and software. So basically, this is the area where these entrepreneurs achieve their success. Hopefully, most of them are familiar to you. This would be Andy Grove, Hungarian-born CEO, former CEO, up until recently, CEO of Intel Corporation, Steve Jobs of Apple, Bill Gates, and who wouldn't recognize the two Google brats, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Well, these other gentlemen also had their co-workers and accomplices in success. Andy Grove was co-founder of Intel together with Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore. Steve Wozniak was Steve Jobs' technical half. Bill Gates did the co-founding of Microsoft together with Paul Allen. But for some reasons, these accomplices didn't become as recognized or didn't stay as much in the limelight as the two Google. So probably that's the reason we don't see all those names mentioned together at all times, but I realized they deserve some recognition since, as we will see, one of the tasks students had to accomplish during the course is to recognize names in the high-tech industry. So, okay, in line with goal group 3, which served as a motivation for our efforts, we also created our little goal or course objective for this added entrepreneurial content. And without the attempt to paraphrase it, I just read it out verbatim. So basically, our goal with this curriculum enhancement would be to provide students with the fundamental facets of the entrepreneurial mindset. Now, like all objectives, this is very broad and very hard to attack. So it's a good idea to break it down or support it with a set of outcomes. And here you can see that the 3 outcomes we created. Basically, students who receive this enhanced curriculum after the completion of the course should have, first of all, a basic knowledge of businesses and a high-level understanding of the economic forces driving the businesses in the field of the related target course, in this particular case, microprocessors. And we understand why it is important to have this trait. It's important because in order to become an entrepreneur in your field, you must know what others did and how they succeeded. Secondly, students should have an ability to formulate new ideas within the field of expertise, present it to peers, and gain support. Again, it follows from common sense that once you know what others did, what would be your contribution? What is the thing you would like to achieve? You have to be able to make it clear, first of all, to yourself and then to your peers. And number 3, students should have the basic understanding of the processes that are required for the successful launch of an operation of an enterprise. So, okay, you know what others did, and you have an idea how they did it. You know what you want to do. Now it's time to figure out how you want to achieve success within your area. Now, the primary challenge we faced is that we were given a certain amount of time. More specifically, microprocessors is a 3-credit-hour course, and my understanding from the different meetings that dealt with revisions of the flowchart, I quickly realized that adding hours to the curriculum is an extremely difficult task. So, at least while the project is in its pilot, we should try to cram, if you lack of a better, cram all contents, including technical contents, into the given time. And that is a major challenge because just to understand that with the same amount of credit hours, we also have the same amount of contact hours. And within this time, we should be able to carry through the same amount of technical content as before. Otherwise, we may jeopardize ABET accreditation if the technical content set forth in the ABET syllabus and generally agreed upon by the engineering profession in the country are not provided to students. So let's see how this challenge was addressed through the classroom innovations we proposed within this project. Well, there are two kinds of classroom activities that I could identify with the addition of this curriculum enhancement. The number one part is that plain old, regular, usual, traditional, and so on course or classroom setup where the technical content is delivered. And basically this follows the syllabus and this provides a skeleton of the course just like in any other course with the usual delivery methods. And this portion, the technical portion of the course, is still delivered with traditional methods, i.e. professor standing in front of the black or whiteboard and provides the presentation of the technical content. Now the entrepreneurial content, on the other hand, follows a bit different approach. The timing of the entrepreneurial blocks of material is adjusted to the point where the course is at in terms of the technical content. In other words, when something, in this particular case microprocessors, when a certain logical unit of the technical content has been presented, or there is a technical aspect that for whatever reasons ties into some entrepreneurial aspect we want to highlight, at that point the classroom switches to the presentation of the entrepreneurial content. Now that uses, as I mentioned, a little bit different delivery method. One kind of exercise, and we'll see in a future slide what the nature of the exercises are, requires the students to form groups and engage in a sort of a brainstorming activity. Another similarly delivered or similarly orchestrated activity is when students receive some kind of a reading or thinking assignment and they discuss it in front of each other, basically groups presenting their findings to each other and provide a peer review. By the way, this drawing is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. If you take a closer look, the gentleman in the cartoon is Lenin. It's just a funny little addition to the slide. All right, so how are these different types of content delivered or provided? What are the sources? The technical content still relies heavily on the course textbook. Now, in order to make it possible to deliver the additional entrepreneurial content as well, the classroom presentations are aided by electronic course notes and lecture notes. Otherwise, simple blackboard presentation would slow the transfer of material down. Now, as for the entrepreneurial content, first of all, there are PowerPoint presentations that we prepared on intellectual property and creativity as being areas that are particularly relevant to entrepreneurship and can be discussed basically anytime during the course in a general level. So in other words, these PowerPoint presentations would serve as the fundamentals for the entrepreneurial mindset, not necessarily heavily tied into the subject material itself. So this content can actually be carried over to other courses as well. Now, microprocessor or subject material related content, on the other hand, is provided or added through different classroom exercises that rely on certain, oftentimes off-class activities, such as reading from a recommended reading list, or a thinking exercise, which will be discussed during class time. So this material ties more into the subject material, or the portion of the subject material that was freshly covered, so the students can see how seemingly dry technological aspects can make a difference when it comes to the application of that device in real life, and how entrepreneurs, recognizing this, made their fortune out there. Take a quick look at the time. All right, so you may ask, what are these classroom activities we talked so much about? Well, one example is quite interesting, because Professor Foster gave me this suggestion of a possible classroom exercise. And the funny thing about it is that I went through the very same thinking process 2 years ago as I was working on the Chrysler project in the framework of the summer professor internship. So it was a kind of a example of serendipity, as what is this example apparently percolating the discussion when it comes to microprocessors. Well, this is no accident. This is kind of a typical or very classic, I would say almost textbook example, except that it does have real-life applications. The question is, how do you interface a keypad with a microprocessor or microcontroller system? Well, you have seen keypads a lot. Some of the doors in certain labs have the little keypad for entry authentication. Microwave ovens, and basically all gadgets nowadays have at least a numeric keypad. Now, as simple as a task may seem, the proper approach is not trivial. There are multiple ways or multiple choices the designer can make. One is, am I going to apply a dedicated chip that was developed for this very purpose of interfacing a keypad with a microcontroller system? The proposal is tempting because it simplifies the firmware. Firmware is typically the term of the software of an embedded system. It simplifies the firmware a great deal, because you think about it, really handling a keypad is quite an involved process. First of all, most keypads nowadays don't just contain individual buttons. Those are typically keys connected in a matrix form. So scanning this keypad and interpreting the results is quite complex. You have to be able to tell which key is being pressed. If there are multiple keys pressed, first of all, you have to be able to detect the fact that multiple keys are pressed, what to do in case that happens. Many keypads have keypad repeat, beep, 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 beep support, and so on. And this chip supports this all, which means that the firmware doesn't have to deal with it. However, this chip is expensive. It's between $5 and $7. One of the reasons may be that the chip is becoming obsolete due to the fact that simple systems that use a keypad also involve such complexities in their firmware that throwing the software management of the keypad in is not a big deal anymore. But let's suppose you are an entrepreneur who still wants to develop a simple gadget with a simple keypad on it, and you scratch your head, you would like to use the hardware, but the chip is quite expensive. Another drawback of this approach is that you have to put it on the circuit board, which makes the design more complex, and manufacturing costs will also increase. The other option is, which I just hinted a little bit a second ago, is that you tough it out, the whole keyboard management from software. Now that's going to simplify the hardware because you need one less component of the circuit board, but the software becomes more complex, and therefore the development of the software will become much more expensive. Now here is the little chunk of the code, just a small portion of the keyboard management subroutine I wrote during the Chrysler project. You can tell that really do a proper job at the problem is quite involved. So all these considerations boil down to cost analysis. Right? This is where the entrepreneurial content comes in. This is where students in a microprocessors course can be exposed to the entrepreneurial aspect. Okay, you are the chief engineer, chief architect, which way of the implementation would you go with? Well, if you choose the hardware support, meaning you decide to buy the chip, your initial cost, which is, well this is a bit exaggerated chart. Obviously, for a proper analysis, exact numbers need to be plugged in, which the students did and will be doing in the course. The initial overhead cost is low because of the low software preparation cost, and of course the initial cost also includes the design of the hardware and circuit board and so on. But we'll see that as the volume increases, the cost incurred by the company who's producing this product will increase because the hardware cost due to the expensive chip will increase. As opposed to the software-based approach, where you have to have an initial investment, a large initial investment for the preparation of the software. However, once that investment has been done, as the volume increases, the cost won't increase as steep as in the case of the hardware because the expensive chip is not part of the budget. And at one point there is a crossover which needs to be identified in order to make a decision which approach will be picked, function of the volume. So this is a classic classroom example students may see in this curriculum. Now, of course, if a student paid close attention and learned something from the course, may get the entrepreneurial spark and say that, I see a niche opportunity here because I understand that contemporary microcontrollers are much cheaper than the dedicated keypad driver chip. You can get small microcontrollers that are way sufficient for the purpose of developing a dedicated keypad controller. Those microcontrollers you can get for $2–3. So an entrepreneurial student may say, what if I get these microcontrollers, put my own time in it, develop the software required to handle the keypad, produce this device that is the microcontroller is my own keypad handling firmware, becomes a new dedicated keypad handling or keypad driver chip, which will be still cheaper than the original chip for $7. So in this case, I can bring the best of both worlds together, and customers who find my website and decide to use my product can save themselves from the nasty ordeal of software development, yet their hardware costs will not increase as steeply as using the original chip. So basically, this is one idea or example that can be mentioned to students. Curiously enough, I found some websites where people, typically moonlighting engineers, did exactly what I just mentioned. Keep what is the custom homegrown keypad handling chips, display drivers, and things like this. I actually emailed to one of these guys. I was curious whether this business does have legs, and he earns a nice profit. And he said obviously it's not a killing, but it provides him with a surprisingly good second revenue source. So you can find all these people out there, and the web is a great help for this kind of miniature entrepreneurial efforts or attempts. Another aspect I'd like to talk about is the Entrepreneurial Mindset Questionnaire that was administered to the students around the middle of the semester. Basically, the purpose of this questionnaire was to, first of all, to gauge how well students are understanding the core concepts of entrepreneurship and the goals of the curriculum-enhanced course. Another aspect or another purpose of this questionnaire was to get some feedback or some feeling from students as we are developing this enhancement, because this is a work in progress, of course. Whether the students can identify with the purposes, how they understand the questions in the question, how they are developing this mindset. And this is not an easy task to gauge, but through this questionnaire we made an attempt at it. And of course, when the curriculum is in full swing, heavy-duty assessment tools need to be developed to make sure that the hopefully measurable outcomes are successfully measured. So this questionnaire could serve as a seed, as a starting point for the development of more advanced assessment tools. Basically, in the questionnaire, 4 questions were asked from students. In one question, they had to recognize the names of famous entrepreneurs. In another question, they needed to identify their favorite company and explain the rationale behind it. In the third question, they had to list the entrepreneurial traits they believed are important from a high-tech entrepreneurial point of view and from a general entrepreneurial point of view. So they had to be able to differentiate between what's important in the high-tech industry and what's important for any kind of entrepreneur who wants to go out and make it there. And finally, famous entrepreneurial quotes were presented to them. One of them is my favorite, from my favorite Andy Grove, "Only the paranoid survive." Explain what that means. A couple of other quotes were also presented to see whether they can understand the meaning of these. Now, the results of these findings were interesting. In terms of students' recognition of famous high-tech industry entrepreneurs was a cat-fight disaster. And I was really surprised because these figures were supposed to be their heroes. Among the names I listed, the founder of Napster, YouTube, MySpace.com, and there were serious gaps there, so that's something that needs to be addressed. It's one thing that you enjoy the technology and you like to play with it, but make sure you know what's really going on behind the scenes, because those people got not only recognition but a significant amount of financial reward. So that's a good idea to learn more about this. However, for the other 3 questions, the results were really satisfactory. Students picked very good companies, first of all, as their favorites, and they provided the right justification as to why they prefer those companies. And they also identified the entrepreneurial traits very well. Well, opinions may differ, but as far as I could gauge, and with the traits I had in mind as the answer to those questions, there was a very nice match. And also they understood what the different quotes mean as well. Well, there were some of them joking around or not taking the question seriously, but students did understand the point behind the quotes. So in conclusion, I would dare to say that this pilot study was a great success in the sense that students still did manage to learn the technical material. If they didn't, they would have had big problems in the final, but I didn't see any drop in their performance when it came to the final examination. However, at the same time, and that is a result from the questionnaire as well as my personal chats and discussions with the students, they did understand the importance of the entrepreneurial mindset and did understand or did consider the possibility of one day becoming an entrepreneur themselves. Of course, this course is just a starting point. They would have to take advanced courses focused primarily or solely on entrepreneurship, because within this course we couldn't provide all necessary information to that direction, but as a missing link, if you will, between technical mindset and entrepreneurial mindset, I like to believe that this effort started to build a bridge. With all this said, there is still a lot of work to be done. Well, one is to identify student weaknesses and focus on those. One example was they didn't know the entrepreneurial characters, so probably the reading assignment should focus on these more actively. And whatever the later questionnaires and assessment tools reveal that we need to be reincorporated in the course. We are always open to more suggestions as to what would make a nice collection of classroom exercises. We saw the example of the keypad interfacing. Another example is, why did IBM choose the Intel microprocessor as opposed to the Motorola microprocessor? Go read about it, tell me what you know. How Bill Gates happened to, was the word I'm looking for, happened to eat IBM's lunch when it came to the PC industry and so on. So these are the different classroom exercises, some of them more technical, some of them more entrepreneurial. And of course, the development of advanced assessment tools is always an ongoing challenge in these efforts. I talked about the recommended reading list that was given to students. Well, just a couple that really ties into entrepreneurship and success in the high-tech industry. Shurkin's book, Engines of the Mind, explains how the first computers and the von Neumann architecture was developed, which was not only von Neumann's work. My heart is breaking, another great Hungarian, but there were other people there as well who contributed. I highly recommend Kringley's book to everybody, Excellent Vampires, or How the Silicon Valley Geeks. There is some long subtitle to it. The report that we will also put on the website contains the full titles and ISBN numbers and so on. Really explains how Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and all these figures succeeded in the course of 70s, 80s, and it's become a very interesting book. There was also a PBS show based on this book. Google story, it's interesting for its contemporary aspects. Just yesterday there was some ribbon cutting ceremony here in Ann Arbor. Google breads are still growing, and it's a very, very good lesson to old, musty companies. And we all know these companies across the country who forgot how to appreciate engineers and the engineering workforce, and they are paying a price for it right now. Google, on the other hand, understood how to inspire and motivate geeks, and look at the miracles they do. And finally, the book titled The Long Tail is a very interesting study of the long tail. Basically refers to the PV chart, where PV doesn't mean pressure and volume. My dear friends, it means the, oops, I picked the wrong pen, profit and volume, and we touched into it a little bit previously. So basically the idea is that, actually, let me correct myself. This is what this PV chart should look like. So if you have large volume, and we are talking about the Walmarts of the world, if you have small profit on the individual goods, you can still make a nice overall profit. However, if you have low volume only, you have to make sure you are able to provide a large profit, otherwise you are not able to survive. And really, the web and the internet as a marketing and advertising tool provided an excellent opportunity to the long tailers, who are again moonlighting engineers or real entrepreneurs who develop something highly specific in their basement and are able to sell it for a high profit because their distribution costs, which previously used to kill these kind of entrepreneurs, are disappearing thanks to the help of the internet. So this book really explains how these little highly specialized entrepreneurs can find a niche and make their profit. And these websites mentioned focus on contemporary technological issues and the people behind it. So the next question you may ask yourself as students, so who is going to be the next successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley? Now, you may or may not have heard, but sadly, this is my last semester here at Lawrence Tech. The silver lining of the story is that my wife and I will move to San Francisco during the summer, so the answer may just be move over to Andy Grove and the Google Breads, because there may be a new entrepreneur lurking on the horizon. I'm not sure yet, but I shall do my best, certainly. So, any questions about what you have heard? Yes?
You said it was all recommended reading. Did you require them to read any of those entrepreneurial type things, or was it all just, like, did you find that they actually read the things you recommended, or did they?
Well, it was copies of articles or a few page excerpts from the book that were recommended, that were required.
Oh, okay.
Typically from these books, and I gave the book as the reference and my high recommendation of reading the entire book.
So they were required to read sections of those books as part of their sentence. Yes.
Did you get a lot or any resistance? I mean, these students weren't signing up for an entrepreneurial course.
Yeah, curiously enough, there was more resistance from faculty than from students. Basically, students' attitude was that, no, cool, entrepreneur, yeah, Google, yeah, I know they are rich. So basically, they liked the way the idea was presented to them, and that is that the technical discipline you are learning may open doors for you to become a successful entrepreneur following the leads of those gentlemen we have seen. So from this aspect, they enjoyed the fact that this content is provided to them. Of course, when it came to what should I read this or how much work is it, they of course weren't happy about it, but you smile there, you understand how this works. But they really liked the idea and found the idea cool, if you will, that they will be able to peek into the brains of these successful people and get an idea at least how a successful career is achieved.
There's a body of research out there that really says, you can tie technical courses to something that is relevant. They can see how it relates to the profession, and they're more motivated to learn, they'll retain the knowledge longer, they're actually less likely to cheat. There's actually research that says if they can relate what they're learning to something they're going to do in the future, they're not, they're actually going to be more honest in the classroom. So it's a pretty significant thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. So you can think of it as a sugar coating of a bitter pill, but once they took the bitter pill in their mouth, they realized that, you know what, it is important, it is an interesting thing to understand the entrepreneurial aspect. So it's not that it's something I don't want to do because I just want to be a geek engineer. They realize that, you know, wait a minute, the doors are open for me as well, so why should I resist these kind of ideas?
Did you just give them the one assignment? Just, you're going to make essentially a keyboard encoder using software versus hardware, or did you let them investigate? I mean, did you put constraints on this? Like, I've designed a lot of this, and I've had students do this, but the size of the keypad. Well, how are you going to handle rollover? Whether you have a processor in the product or it's a processor-free product, did you have, I mean,
yeah,
entrepreneurship can be taught, but I think when you have to sit down and make a business model for something, you got to talk about what you're designing. You can't just you can't just give them a specific package thing and say, I want you to think about being an entrepreneur about this. Did you open it up and say, you know, if I've got 128 keys and I have to respond in this, how would you handle that problem versus I got a 4x4 keypad that's sitting on a door opener? There's a whole difference involved in the business model which makes you start thinking as an entrepreneur. Did you give them that?
Answer to your question, no. Okay, more elaborate. What happened was, really the keyboard interfacing or keypad interfacing is an assignment they will tackle in embedded systems, not in microprocessors. So that's why the investigation of the entire technical solution was not required in the first place. Now, the example in its simple form was provided because it highlights aspects how you go about thinking about solution to a problem. In other words, or simply put, of course, what they received as the question, okay, chip versus software, is just the highest level, first order approach to the problem. But this is what they could handle in the microprocessor course based on their technical knowledge and based on their entrepreneurial exposure. So this was more like an example, and there was no full design, and students understood that even with these calculations, we still cannot be a Mr. Entrepreneur out there. Even the simplest design, and some senior project students this semester found it out, even the simplest design needs tremendous amount of work from conception to mechanical design, where the size of the keypad comes into play. So, of course, they will have to follow through this in other courses, including their senior project. In microprocessors, this example was provided to show them that, look, a keypad interfacing has this kind of implications or what's the word I'm looking for, aspects that go beyond technical content. Because when you use a chip or you use a software, technically the result will be the same. Whether you prefer software or prefer hardware because you like to code or like to solder, that's irrelevant. At the end of the day, the keypad will do the same thing. So, am I free to choose either one? No, because then the next question comes, what are the costs? And so on. So, answering your question, this keypad example was just an eye-opener how this mindset works. Greg, did you?
I was going to ask a question about your mindset evaluation or assessment. Mm-hmm. What were they, and is that available to other people, what you use?
Sure, I can pull it up now, or I can put it on the, what time? Would you like me to pull up the file, or would you like me to put it on the website?
I'd like to see it on the web, and there is, NCIAA has put out also some questionnaires that we piloted in a couple courses. And the other question is, did you do a pre-test, pro-test?
No, see, that's where the methodology is still developing. Sure. And that's why I'm talking about the Entrepreneurial Mindset Questionnaire as a mid-course assessment of both ourselves and the student. Obviously, in the future, it would be a pre-test focusing on entrepreneurial aspects, right, and an end-of-course test, and that would provide a comparison.
I have a couple. Let's pick your brain a little bit more. You mentioned embedded systems, or a follow-up course. Your conclusion was that this was a success. What is your thoughts then on trying to embed the entrepreneurial mindset into other courses in the curriculum? I mean, should there be other junior level courses that also have this? Should there be should you strategize and have, okay, it'll be microprocessors, embedded systems? And, I understand you're leaving, so, but if you got to call all the shots for how the curriculum was going to develop, what would be your suggestions?
Well, I would say that to the level we applied these ideas in a microprocessors course could be incorporated in other courses as well, particularly embedded systems you mentioned, and I pointed out multiple times, also because this is a follow-up course to the microprocessors and because of the entrepreneurs' experience in this area. Embedded systems would be an excellent candidate for a similar curriculum enhancement. However, I would be thinking twice, or I would be a little careful including this kind of content on lower level courses or earlier courses, particularly because the fundamental or core curriculum courses, for example, digital circuits, their students are really very busy learning the fundamentals. And really the discussion is so high level and theoretical that entrepreneurial content is hard to relate. Or electromagnetics, for example, well, you can say that, well, whoever builds a better coil in an MRI machine is the guy, but really it of course depends on what subject matter experts recommend. But I would say that as far as I understand the curriculum, really microprocessors and embedded systems are a great candidate. Other courses may require some thinking. Maybe possible, may not be that appropriate.
Are those both required courses or electives?
Embedded is only elective.
Micro is required.
Computer engineering is required.
Oh, for computer engineering is required, yeah. Now, do we want a course that is required for everybody, or if it's required for a subset of students, it's good enough already? In which case, embedded would be another candidate.
Any other questions? Thank you.